Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
The culture and the philosophy of really what makes St. Louis a great city.
Welcome to Wildcare Park.
This will be an entirely different experience.
Maybe that makes you look at us differently, hopefully with a little bit more empathy.
Today on Spotlight, the St. Louis Zoo buys 425 acres in Spanish Lake. Find out when you can go on a safari in St. Louis. Plus, exploring climate change and human interaction through art at the Duane Reed Gallery. And then, should children and teenagers get the new COVID booster? What a WashU doctor wants you to know. But first, HEC's Victoria Babu sits down with New York Times bestselling author of Solito. It's Sunday and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
El Salvador's 12-year bloody civil war forced many of its people to escape the Central American country during the 1980s. Javier Zamora's parents were among those who fled. The 32-year-old author was a toddler when his father migrated to the United States. When he was 5, his mother crossed the border, leaving Zamora in the care of his grandparents and aunts. In 1999, at the age of 9, his parents paid a network of smugglers called Coyotes to bring him to their new life in California.
We used the same person that brought my mom over here in 1995. And the trip is supposed to take 2 weeks.
Instead, Zamora was left at the Guatemala-Mexico border with 6 strangers. The 2-week journey turned into a harrowing 2 months. All of it is chronicled in his memoir, Solito.
And I began to write from my 9-year-old voice, and it just flowed.
With his vivid descriptions, the reader feels Zamora's 9-year-old innocence and fears, paired with adult traumas. What he endured has come with extensive therapy, which started soon after he arrived in California.
The therapist would ask me a question in Spanish, and eventually I would draw a helicopter chasing me. I would draw myself in immigration detention cells. I would draw myself on this boat. This became the first time after telling my parents that I told a stranger what I had lived through. And that was therapeutic, and it was necessary. And it also made it easier for me to continue my life.
Everything happens fast. Handcuffs on Chino, uniforms do the same to the others who didn't run fast enough.
Although he succeeded academically, his anger still raged until he found a voice through poetry.
For 20 plus years, I was ashamed of that 9-year-old kid. I saw him as this defenseless, helpless child that shouldn't be in this country, or I kept on asking, why did that kid live through it?
Zamora's collection is called Unaccompanied. The lauded poet has been a Stegner Fellow at Stanford and a Radcliffe Fellow at Harvard, and holds fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Poetry Foundation.
After spending more than 3 years writing this book, I've grown to love the kid and understand that he has impressive superpowers and an impressive skill to attach himself to the right people at the right time, and is a great survivor.
What is your hope for Solito? What do you hope for immigrants, migrants, naturalized citizens to get out of this? Everybody.
I hope it's a conversation starter. A conversation starter for us, immigrants who have lived and gone through similar experiences. For the longest, I never saw other people talk about what they have gone through. And hopefully, me doing this with the help of my wife, who's a Reiki practitioner, with the help of medication, with the help of meditation, with the help of my therapist, and that I've embarked on this, and hopefully me embarking on this makes it okay for other survivors to begin to have that internal conversation with themselves. For non-survivors, I hope that the next time that you look at an immigrant or think of an immigrant, now you know at least 4 of them. You know me, you know this face, you know Chino, you know Patricia, you know Carla, and you know their names. And maybe that makes you look at us differently, hopefully with a little bit more empathy. And that could also be the beginning of better conversations than the ones that we're having now.
To find out why describing smells and sounds were important in writing his book and in his healing, watch the full interview at hecmedia.org.
HEC Media. Recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. HEC Media has been bringing home the hardware for over a decade. Arts and education to author talks, magazine shows and documentaries, individual craft achievements to overall excellence. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
Welcome to Wildcare Park. St. Louis Zoo Wildcare Park is our 425-acre campus here in unincorporated Spanish Lake. We are opening in 2027, so a little ways away, but that gives us plenty of time to finish up our planning and do construction and get the animals used to being on the property.
This will be an entirely different experience than what you have been used to at the St. Louis Zoo. It's going to be a larger area. It's going to be multi-species mixed together, hopefully living in harmony. So it'll be a little bit of a different experience every time you come. The animals will have free range, free roam of about 100 acres in one pasture and about 60 acres in the other pasture. So you don't know where you might find them. You're likely to see different animals every time you visit Wildcare Park. There's a variety of species that we've been looking at. The very first sort of filter that we put our collection plan through was looking at what species would do best in St. Louis's climate and with the native wildlife that's already living on this property.
We are going to have grubby zebra and some addax, Somali wild ass. We will have multiple pastures where we will breed endangered ungulates or animals with hooves. And we're going to give them private space where we can build up those numbers, and many of those species have current or future recovery programs. So ideally, some of the animals that are born here go back to their rangeland to help our conservation efforts. And then the other half, which is going to be our public part of the experience, the main draw will be 2 large safari pastures where we're going to put people on vehicles and ride them through those 2 pastures. We have a savanna pasture where the star of that pasture will be giraffe. And then we have a woodland safari, which the star of that pasture will be white rhinos. It'll be really cool to be on a vehicle probably around the size of a bus. We will ride on that path. It'll be about 20 minutes, and we'll get to talk about the animals and what they're doing in real time. This is scale and scope, where the animals are in the large pasture and you're among them, whereas at the zoo, the animals they're in their exhibit and you're kind of outside of it. So it's a really wonderful complementary set of guest experiences, all designed to, of course, bring our guests closer to animals and build that connection with nature.
A soul artist turned community facilitator, later on Spotlight.
We are here at Duane Reed Gallery, where we're opening 2 new exhibitions with Beverly Mayeri, a California-based artist, and Kensuke Yamada, an Arkansas-based artist originally from Japan. Beverly Mayeri is a ceramic and mixed media artist whose work deals with current issues, including climate change.
For instance, in my painting, with the California coast, should we go or should we stay? Everyone is concerned with the environment for the next generation to be able to have a good life, because we've led a life that's been first class, really, without thinking about this, and now we really have to change. I like to think out my ideas in the case of sculpture and paintings. I have been a ceramic sculptor for many years, and on my sculptures I often do painting with acrylics in a watery kind of texture. I like to show some of what we might be thinking of and connecting to by showing it on the surface of the clay. And that is especially the case in Head of the Family. If you look at Head of the Family, it's all about my own family, but it's probably similar to your family. It is connecting to others around us in a deep way that we carry with us. And one interesting feature in that piece is my mother is depicted there handing over a paintbrush to me, the next generation. When I was young, I used to watch my mother doing watercolor painting. And it really was something that was so important to her. And when I started to do it myself, it became very important for me to also be an artist. In the last few years, I started to do paintings in watercolors using the same techniques I use in ceramic sculpture. This is the first time I've really shown paintings with sculpture, so I'm really pleased to see how they go together, because they all have similar color arrangements and ideas. So I think it works really well, and I'm very excited about this show.
As we walk into the second gallery, you will see the new exhibition by Kensuke Yamada. Kensuke is a ceramic professor at the University of Arkansas in Little Rock, and his work deals with the universality of human interaction. A defining feature of Kensuke's work is his very bold use of glazes and construction of his figures. We're very excited to have Kensuke's work back at the gallery. This is his second exhibition with us. And a primary focus of ours when we curate artists into the gallery is their usage of material. And Kensuke's very bold usage of ceramic and clay bodies exemplifies that pursuit. Both Beverly Mayeri and Kensuke Yamada's exhibitions are on view until December 3rd. And more information can be found on our website at DuaneReedGallery.com.
Looking for videos to use in homeschool, classroom, or hybrid learning settings? Need them aligned to standards, lesson plans, or activity ideas? We've got them at educate.today.
Join educate.today at 30% off with coupon code ETSpotlight.
COVID-19 restrictions loosened, mask mandates dropped, and summer travel surged. It became the season of what's called revenge travel. But there are reports and concerns that the next COVID wave could be on a collision course with holiday travel and holiday gatherings. Yet, many Americans have resumed activities without masks and act like the pandemic is a thing of the past.
We've gotten so used to it, right? We're so used to people always being in the hospital with COVID. We're so used to hearing people are dying from complications of COVID that this is just part of it.
Dr. Jason Newland is a pediatric infectious diseases physician and professor, and he's vice chair of community health and strategic planning for the Department of Pediatrics in the Division of Infectious Diseases at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. Newland believes a lot of people have let their guard down without realizing some alarming facts. In the United States alone,
there's over 350 people dying a day of COVID-19. As of October 19, 2022, now that's way better than it was at 400. But when you're having 12,000 people die in a month, that's a lot of people dying in a month from a virus.
That's why Newland says the updated bivalent COVID-19 boosters against the newer COVID-19 strains are so important.
The new COVID boosters are comprised of the Omicron variants that have been circulating most recently, this BA4, BA5, as well as the original vaccine. So it's a bivalent vaccine. These are important because this vaccine is more targeted to what the COVID-19 is currently.
Newland says COVID-19 vaccines are effective against symptomatic infections.
And the data is very clear, especially those 65 and older. If you had your primary series but weren't boosted, you are 2.5 times more likely to be hospitalized. If you are completely unvaccinated, you are 10 times more likely to be hospitalized. You need to think about, number one, well, definitely be boosted. Number two, get all your family members boosted and vaccinated, because right now you're going to give yourself another layer of protection.
The booster is recommended for younger people and children.
Over 1,700 kids have died of COVID-19 in our country. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot when we've had over 1 million. But let's put it in context. Influenza kills 150 to 200 kids every year, right? Now, the pandemic isn't even 3 years old, and we're well above that.
Newland believes the vaccines and the updated booster help reduce transmission from one person to the next.
And data shows vaccinated people less likely to shed as well. So you just reduce the risk of transmitting to others if you're vaccinated. If your whole family's vaccinated and they're at the height of their vaccines, their chances of getting symptomatically sick and spread it become less. So you have to say that those families that have been vaccinated have been less likely to end up in the hospital and also less likely to give it to other people.
Which he says has not been made clear enough to the public.
That's how we've done vaccines, right? We vaccinate all family members for pertussis. We do that because that prevents the baby from getting it. That's why I think that terminology gets confusing, but we need to show that better.
For this reason, Newland feels children and teenagers should get the bivalent booster, not only for themselves, but also to benefit older adults.
Especially have grandparents, you want to see them during the holidays. If I have a family that's vaccinated, they are less likely to get it. We know that, right? We know that even if it's 60% effective against symptomatic disease, well, if they're not getting it, they can't pass it.
For original programming and award-winning content, explore hecmedia.org. Find all of your favorite genres, including the arts and sciences. Go in-depth with the latest research. Get insight into new technologies. Learn about breakthrough discoveries. Find it all in one place. Explore hecmedia.org. Missouri is vast, from the mighty Mississippi to the mountains, from rural farmland to the bustling cities of St. Louis and Kansas City. It is often the backdrop of stories by the most prolific writers who have ever put pen to paper.
Most of the adventures recorded in this book really occurred. 1 or 2 were experiences of my own, the rest those of boys who were schoolmates of mine.
From the past to the present, Mark Twain, born Samuel Clemens in 1835, moved to Hannibal, Missouri when he was 4. The small river town had a lasting impact on his life and work, dealing with issues of slavery, poverty, and class differences.
When I think of my wife, I always think of her head, the shape of it to begin with.
Gillian Flynn, whose Gone Girl was a New York Times bestseller, was born in Kansas City, Missouri in 1971. The book was later turned into a movie and shot in Cape Girardeau.
Some people weren't born here, but they felt so compelled to live here that the area just inspired them to build their home and build their family here. You know, some went off and lived elsewhere, but really felt the need to come back. And I think that passion of Missouri is what drives them all to write.
In honor of the Missouri Bicentennial, the Eugene Fieldhouse Library hosted a special exhibit, Missouri Writers, 200 Years of Talent.
One of the books that inspired us in this exhibit was Mark Twain Abroad, and it was and Eugene Field and Mark Twain Abroad. And it was about the two of them and their different travels, not necessarily with each other, but their travels at the same time period and how they viewed what they were doing. And that kind of showed us that there were connections here in Missouri, and we wanted to go from there.
Mark Twain took his Missouri roots up east, starting the Missouri Society of New York.
The sun's a setting.
Writers like Langston Hughes, born in Joplin, Missouri in 1902, continued that legacy. And in 1963, he was elected a trustee of the Missouri Society of New York. Often writing about the struggles of Black people, Hughes went on to become the poet laureate of Harlem.
What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun?
The exhibit featured the 12-volume set of its namesake, Eugene Field's work, and an original copy of this poem he wrote in perfect penmanship.
This one being a manuscript of Lover's Lane. Lover's Lane is a lane in St. Joe, Missouri, where Eugene would take his lovely wife, then when he was courting her, down. So Lover's Lane became quite the road in St. Joe. It's still there today. They still honor him there.
Winkin', blinkin', and Nod one night sailed off in a wooden shoe.
Born in St. Louis in 1850, Eugene Field was known as the children's poet. Another notable writer from St. Louis also wrote children's books. Kay Thompson, born Catherine Kitty Fink in 1909, wrote the series of books about Eloise, a 6-year-old girl that lived in the Plaza Hotel in New York. Thompson lived at the Plaza in the 1950s.
And baby Carrie left their little house in the big woods of Wisconsin.
Born in Wisconsin after the family moved to Mansfield, Missouri, Laura Ingalls Wilder began her career as a writer in 1894. She published Little House in the Big Woods in 1932, the first of her popular series. Today, her home in Mansfield is a museum.
I'd rather stay on this hot tin roof.
The great American playwright Tennessee Williams, known for his Pulitzer Prize-winning plays like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, was born Thomas Lanier Williams in 1911 in Mississippi. But when he was 13, his family moved to St. Louis.
His background, his family life was challenging for him. He came from the South. They moved to St. Louis when he was a young boy. He was short. He was very Southern, and he was homosexual, and he was not accepted here.
It was here in the Central West End that Tennessee Williams grew into the artist that he would become. Down the street from his home, he worked as a writer in residence at a 500-seat theater, now known as the Link Auditorium.
So this is where Tennessee performed with a group called the Mummers in the late 30s. And his first full-length play was produced by them. They were a community theater group that was on the edgy side, bohemians. They all had day jobs.
Tennessee Williams struggled with mental illness and drug addiction. In 1983, he lost his battle and died of a drug overdose in New York City. His brother brought him back to St. Louis to be buried here at Calvary Cemetery.
The black female is assaulted in her tender years by all those common forces of nature at the same time that she is caught in the tripartite crossfire of masculine prejudice, white illogical hate, and black lack of power.
Award-winning poet and writer Maya Angelou was born in St. Louis in 1928, here at 3130 Hickory Street. Now registered as a St. Louis landmark, she lived here until she was 3 years old.
Buildings have a power to tell stories and to connect physically with people's imaginations in a unique way. And so, these bricks behind us were here. She knew these bricks. She knew these streets. And this is the home that sheltered her. So there is a very physical, tangible connection to this great American encompassed in this building.
At the time, this neighborhood was very segregated. St. Louis forced race-based housing restrictions until the late 1940s.
There weren't that many neighborhoods where African Americans were allowed to live, and this was one of them.
Many writers deal with their own pain on the page, in their world wrestling with words that become life-changing for them and their readers.
Whether they were always here or moved away, there was always something about Missouri that brought them back to their roots or what became their legacy.
This story is brought to you in partnership with STL Made.
10 years ago, if you would have asked me what I did, I would have said, I'm an American soul artist. I'm realizing my relationship to the city is changing. As I get a little bit older, turning into more of the ambassador for the city. I want to be a spokesperson for the creative space. I think what we're experiencing right now, coming out of the pandemic, is a 7 to 10 year window of renaissance that can happen in the city. A lot of people are waking up to the fact that St. Louis is not just the place that we wanted to grow up in and get out of. I think we're starting to see that St. Louis is a place that deserves resources, especially in places that have traditionally and historically not gotten those resources. I think my passion for pouring into and creating opportunities for young creatives comes from the fact that that's what people did for me. It's always been this drive to want to help and develop and work with young people to achieve their highest potential, first of all, as human beings, and then say, now what do you want to do? And helping to facilitate them moving in the areas that they want to be in. The more I got into facilitating community development, it started to shift. Life Creative STL ecosystem, that's the overarching umbrella. It's comprised of two main components. The for-profit side is Life Creative Group. Life Creative Group is the entity and company that I started primarily to provide a place for shared equity for all the young creatives that I work with right now. On the nonprofit side, what you have now is a wonderful collection of partners. So you have Beyond Housing, a financial service firm, American Portfolios, Maryville University, M1 Bank, and then you have Arms Will Accelerate. And it's all connected up for me, under this umbrella of the Life Creative STL ecosystem. And the STL is very intentional. What I do here at the Chess Hall of Fame, I think, is indicative of what that is. I work with the folks here to create space, opportunity, experiences, and resources for young creatives to come in. When they call this the World Chess Hall of Fame, it is literally the center of chess for the entire world. And so I think it's a great mapping together of this idea that, like, we need to tell these narratives to help us facilitate a new way of thinking about our city. And that takes strategy and improvisation. The next move, I want to be able to now take my young creatives and position them to now be curators. To have a writer's round that's akin to what you would see in Nashville at Bluebird Cafe, but have it in the backside of Kingside Diner. But as much as it takes resources, it takes relationship. Music at the Intersection is a way for me to really be a mouthpiece for what I feel is a renaissance that's coming to St. Louis. It gives us an event that people can consume. Not just the music and the level of talent, but the culture and the philosophy of really what makes St. Louis a great city. Whether it's the World Chess Hall of Fame or it's Grand Center, these are all places and spaces where these young creators are going to converge, live, work. One of the best investments you can make is into the creative space and these young creatives in this city, and to telling and remapping the story of St. Louis to be, I believe, true to what we really are. We're a beautiful contradiction that seeks resolution and can find it.
Next week, a profile of St. Louis and Irma Rombauer, who wrote The Joy of Cooking in 1931. Plus, an update on Gift-A-Meal as they reached a major milestone. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.